The planetary descent into Lycentra's atmosphere was more turbulent than Ian Rourke expected, but the sight of the crystalline city beneath him silenced any complaints. Hexagonal towers reflected golden sunlight, surrounded by a patchwork of bioengineered gardens and atmospheric processors. It was like descending into a kaleidoscope of civilization, sharp, brilliant, and otherworldly. Ian pressed his hand against the shuttle's cold viewport, watching as the capital city of Miradex Prime, Varen Spire, drew nearer. He had fought tooth and nail through Earth's endless bureaucratic filters to earn this visa. 4 years of applications, tests, background scans. Finally, he was off-world. A new beginning. Passenger Rourke, the voice of the Lycentra Port Authority AI, echoed through the cabin, cool and genderless. Please report to Arrival Base 7 for processing. Ian grabbed his duffel bag and stepped into the artificial warmth of the port corridor, his boots clicking on synthetic marble. Everything gleamed too clean, too symmetrical. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral. Synthetic perfection. Inside the immigration processing zone, he found a small chamber labeled Human Orientation Protocol Suite. As he entered, the door sealed shut behind him with a hiss. Welcome to Lycentra, the AI said again, this time from a central hollow emitter. Your visa has been approved under Class S status. Please confirm your identity. Ian pressed his hand into the biometric pad. Ian Rourke. Earth origin. Class S work visa. Confirmed. Class S status includes civic privileges, residential assignment, and participation in the Species Continuity Accord. Ian blinked. The what now? The AI's holographic form blinked twice, almost as if confused. The Accord clause was included in your signed visa documents under subsection 14.3. I thought that was a health waiver or something, Ian muttered. Incorrect. As a Class S human male, your genetic profile has been selected for Accord participation due to its high immunogenic stability and mitochondrial variability. I still don't know what that means, Ian said slowly, growing uneasy. It means a new voice interjected from behind him. You've been matched. Ian spun around. Standing at the newly opened side entrance was a tall figure draped in dark cobalt robes. Her silver-flecked eyes focused intently on him. Her skin was pearlescent lilac, her posture commanding but elegant. I'm Talia Vey, she said, her voice smooth and deliberate. And you, Ian Rourke, have just become a critical piece of the Accord. They sat across from each other in a waiting lounge designed to ease interspecies tension, though Ian suspected its main function was to prevent freakouts like the one he was barely containing. Soft lighting, calming sounds, and aromatic diffusers filled the space. Talia explained slowly, as if breaking the news to a child. Lycentra faces an existential genetic bottleneck. Despite our advanced genome engineering, entropy has caught up with us. Mutation rates are failing to stabilize, and genetic drift is rendering entire bloodlines unsustainable. And you're solving this with, dating, Ian asked, half sarcastic, half serious. Interspecies pairing. Selective based on the Accord protocol. Compatibility is determined through biometric and psychological alignment. You mean I signed up to be part of a breeding program? You volunteered, Talia said matter-of-factly, and your signature is binding. Ian slumped back into the biomesh chair, fingers rubbing his temples. I came here to work, get away from Earth, make something of myself, not be some sort of alien stud. Your reaction is common, Talia replied coolly. But if it helps, compliance comes with additional civic privileges. Healthcare, elevated housing status, transport, priority extended residency. And if I say no, her gaze sharpened, you would be in breach of contract. That may trigger revocation of your visa and immediate deportation. Earth currently has a 19-year waiting list for readmission, assuming you survive the economic downturn. Ian exhaled sharply. God, I should have read the fine print. Talia rose smoothly, her voice softening. This isn't slavery, Ian. It's survival. For both our species. The Accord ensures consent at every phase. But once consent is given, there are expectations. He stared at her. You talk like a lawyer. I was, she said, before the Accord assigned me to genetic compatibility facilitation. I'm your primary liaison and your match. Ian didn't know what to say. Talia stepped forward. Your orientation begins tomorrow. You'll receive social and psychological compatibility assessments followed by optional preliminary bonding activities. Optional, Ian repeated. So I can still say no? Talia tilted her head slightly. Technically, but non-participation limits your visa privileges. Think of it as a civic duty. You wanted a new life, Ian. This is part of that life now. That night in the stark but comfortable confines of his temporary housing unit, Ian couldn't sleep. The walls shimmered faintly with ambient bioluminescence, and the temperature adjusted minutely based on his breath patterns. He sat on the edge of the bed staring at the tablet he'd been issued. On the screen, a full 312-page copy of his visa agreement. He scrolled to section 14, 3 species continuity accord, and skimmed over phrases like genetic integration, cross-species contribution, voluntary conditional conscription. They'd buried it in jargon. He'd seen the words but never understood what they meant. His thoughts were interrupted by a chime. Visitor at entrance node, the apartment's AI announced. Display. The wall shimmered again to reveal a different licensure, this one, with deep indigo skin, large reflective eyes, and what looked like bioluminescent scales running down her neck. Her voice was musical and formal. I am Valana Che. I am your second designated accord partner. Ian's shoulders sagged. He hadn't even made it through one orientation day. I have not been briefed, he said wearily. It is unnecessary, she replied. Your profile has been updated. Assignment confirmation was issued 1 hour ago. Ian stepped back from the monitor. I'm going to need a minute. Take all the time you need, she said without irony. You are central to our salvation. He couldn't sleep that night. In less than 24 hours, Ian had gone from hopeful immigrant to involuntary participant in a complex cross-species reproduction program, one cloaked in legality, cultural diplomacy, and technical consent. But the question wasn't just what had happened to him. It was why he had been chosen, and what the Accord really wanted, and whether anyone in this perfectly ordered world of radiant spires and regulated genetics was willing to ask what he wanted. The morning light filtered through the translucent walls of Ian's temporary suite, its soft hues shifting between amber and violet. The apartment adjusted its internal climate to simulate Earth-normal morning as per his biometric preferences. Ian didn't feel rested. He hadn't even used the bed. Instead, he stood on the balcony overlooking Varen's Spire's lower levels. The city buzzed silently beneath him, no honking cars or smog-choked air. Just gliding transit pods, biodrone flocks, and gravity-defying platforms rising and falling in choreographed patterns. And him, an Earth expatriate turned genetic contributor. The door chimed. He tensed automatically. Display visitor. Scifi. The panel shimmered to reveal Talia Vey again, draped in her indigo-accented formal wear. Her hair, normally tied back in tight strands, flowed freely today. She looked less like a civil official and more like a person. It was a small but deliberate change. Ian, she said simply, may I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. Talia entered with practiced grace, eyes scanning the room. I've been authorized to oversee your first day of Accord orientation. How generous, Ian muttered, slumping onto the edge of a floating stool. Let's just cut to it. What does today involve? More charming women showing up to announce I'm their designated breeding stock? She folded her arms. Today is psychological evaluation. After that preliminary social bonding and cultural immersion. There will be no intimate engagement unless you explicitly consent. How progressive of you, he said, tone heavy with sarcasm. Talia ignored it. Before we proceed, I've brought something for clarity. She extended a data pad toward him. This is your full genetic compatibility dossier. Ian glanced at it, uncertain. What is it? Proof, she said, that this isn't random. He skimmed the first few pages. The technical language made his head hurt, but a few phrases stood out. Immune factor delta resilience, 94.2% cross-species adaptability. Adaptive mitochondrial sequencing, consistent with interspecies viability. Projected hybrid viability, 88.6%. Ian let the pad fall into his lap. So I'm a unicorn. You're rare, she admitted. Your DNA offers a repair sequence we can't replicate artificially. That's why you've been matched with 6 Accord candidates. 6? Talia nodded. Valana was the second. You'll meet the others incrementally, not all at once. How considerate. I understand your resistance, she said, sitting across from him. But you were selected not because we wanted to exploit you. We need you. Lycentra's survival hinges on contributions like yours. Ian sighed. I never wanted this responsibility. Few do, Talia replied softly. But most grow into it. The evaluation center was housed within a tower shaped like an hourglass, its form held in place by anti-gravity vanes humming with energy. Inside, Ian was greeted by an Etheron facilitator, a tall, willowy Lysentran whose limbs seemed to shimmer with kinetic energy. Human subject Ian Rourke, the facilitator, said in a melodic voice, "We will begin psychological mapping now. Please step into the resonance chamber." The chamber resembled a giant floating sphere with neural webbing spread across its surface. When Ian stepped inside, the sphere closed, leaving him in darkness momentarily. Then came the pulse. It wasn't painful, just overwhelming. Memories surfaced unbidden: his father's funeral on a rainy Boston afternoon, the flickering screen of the immigration application site, the hunger he'd felt during his last year on Earth, both literal and metaphorical. Questions emerged in his mind as though spoken by the room itself. What does family mean to you? Do you believe survival justifies coercion? Would you give yourself to save another species? He didn't answer, not out loud. But his thoughts weren't private. The resonance chamber absorbed everything. After what felt like hours, the pod opened, and he stumbled out into the waiting lounge. Talia stood nearby, watching him with unreadable eyes. You did well, she said. I didn't do anything, Ian muttered. You didn't resist the process. That's enough for today. Later, they sat in a quiet tea room above the Harmony district, surrounded by the floating gardens of Miradex flora. Bioluminescent petals drifted lazily across the air like snowflakes. The tea, some sort of herbal blend from native Lysentran moss, tasted oddly like mint and almonds. Talia watched him carefully. There's something you should know. Villana, your second match, works in the Accord Compliance Division. You mean the bureaucracy that enforces all this? Yes, Talia said. She's not just a match. She's an administrator. Ian set his teacup down, brows furrowed. So she could void my visa, she could escalate non-compliance, Talia confirmed. But she won't. She's flexible, unlike some. And you, I'm in between, she said. I was one of the early volunteers who helped design the original Accord principles. It was meant to be mutual, never coercive. But desperation changes politics. He watched her, uncertain how to read her. She had always been composed, factual, but something in her tone now hinted at disillusionment. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you deserve to know the system isn't monolithic. There are factions. Not everyone agrees with how things are being done. Ian leaned forward. So what are you saying? That there's a resistance? No, she said carefully, but there are alternatives. Other paths for people like you, such as, that depends, she said, on whether you're willing to play the long game. Later that evening, Ian received a message from Villana Chai Accord Bonding. Session scheduled Phase 1 0800 tomorrow. Location Skytrace Dome. Attire flexible. Your cooperation is expected. No signature, just coordinates and instructions. He sighed and rubbed his face. Flexible attire. That couldn't be good. He turned off the pad and went to stand at the balcony again. Below him, the lights of Varen's spire blinked in rhythmic pulses like a breathing organism. This place was beautiful, advanced, and completely alien. And somewhere beneath all the veneer of order and harmony, something darker moved. Talia had hinted at it. But how deep did it go? Ian arrived at the Skytrace Dome in the early morning haze, clad in what passed for flexible attire on Lycentra. A sleek thermo-adaptive outfit that hugged the skin and adjusted to atmospheric shifts. The dome itself hovered above a narrow spine of magnetic stabilizers, a shimmering translucent structure suspended like a bubble in the sky. Inside, the atmosphere was calm, but unnervingly controlled. Verdant walkways twisted through a gravity-defying obstacle course. Floating rings rotated silently in midair. Streams of data pulsed across the ceiling, projecting Ian's vitals in alien script. Villana Che was already waiting, dressed in a combat form version of the Accord robe, her bioluminescent scale stripes more pronounced today. She looked him up and down with those unreadable, prism-like eyes. You're late, she said simply. It's 07:59, Ian replied. Accord bonding values precision. He exhaled slowly. So what exactly are we doing here? Phase 1 physical compatibility calibration. Endurance, agility, neural responsiveness. You mean a workout? A controlled assessment, she corrected. Licentrin physiology demands rigorous testing for successful co-development. Physical resilience is a necessary foundation. Ian followed her through the warm-up phase, dynamic stretching in low-gravity chambers, balancing platforms that shifted in real time with his pulse and reflex nodes that fired bursts of light requiring rapid acknowledgement. Then the real trials began. They ran, if it could be called that, across shifting bridges suspended by magnetic currents. Ian stumbled often. Villana never missed a step. They climbed rotating columns, swam through anti-gravity currents, and dodged pulse projectiles fired from floating drones. By the end of the third hour, Ian collapsed near a glowing pool, panting, soaked in sweat. Villana stood above him, her breathing calm. Acceptable performance. Is that your idea of praise? Ian wheezed. It means you didn't fail, she said. Statistically, most humans do. You're all heart. She crouched beside him. Your vitals remained above baseline. Neural latency is tolerable. You're adaptable. That's rare. He blinked, surprised at what almost sounded like a compliment. You're not exactly warm and fuzzy, Villana. I'm not here to coddle you, she said. I'm here to ensure you meet accord expectations. Ian sat up. You know you talk like this is just a job. Do you actually believe in this whole continuity through compatibility thing? Villana's eyes narrowed. Belief is irrelevant. The outcome is necessary. That's not what I asked. She hesitated, and for a moment Ian thought he'd caught her off guard. I believe survival requires sacrifice, she said finally. You think that's clinical? I think it's honest. After returning to his apartment, Ian barely managed to shower before collapsing onto his bed. His body screamed in protest. He hadn't been this sore since his short-lived attempt at amateur kickboxing on Earth. Just as he was drifting into a nap, his compad chimed. A priority message. Origin Talia Ve, subject immediate meeting. Discrete location archive node. Gamma 6. Great, Ian thought. No rest for the genetically gifted. The archive node was a sub-level facility buried beneath Varen Spire's administrative sector. There were no guide bots, no decorative architecture, and no ambient music. Just cold light and silent hallways. Talia was already inside a small research pod reviewing strands of DNA sequences that floated in the air like shimmering helixes. Thanks for coming, she said without turning. Close the door. The moment Ian complied, the pod activated a privacy veil. We don't have much time, Talia began. I received a flagged report from internal monitoring about what your session with Villana. It was accelerated. Ian frowned. She ran me through an obstacle course from hell. That's not the issue. She moved phase 1, bonding to a level 3 integration speed. That's normally reserved for established pairs, not new candidates. Ian rubbed his face. Are you saying she's pushing me too fast? She's not supposed to push at all. Villana works in compliance. She's testing thresholds for you for the system. It's possible she suspects your alignment isn't purely cooperative. Ian tensed. I've done everything they've asked. You've also met with me alone more than permitted. You're asking too many questions. That sets off internal triggers. He leaned forward. So what do I do? Talia tapped her wrist pad and sent a data packet to his device. That's the secondary accord clause, buried in the administrative protocols. It outlines an alternative route to contribution cultural exchange service, intellectual data transfer, and limited genetic study via donation, not direct pairing. Wait, you're saying I could still participate without being paired if approved, she said. The problem is the clause requires dual sponsorship, from a licentran and from a cross-species ethics liaison. I don't have either. You might, she said cautiously. There's a contact I trust. She works in data governance. Neutral territory. I'll set a meeting, but you'll have to be discreet, and you'll need to hold Villana at bay. Easier said than done, Ian muttered. Talia's voice softened. I believe you can handle it. You've already shown more resilience than most participants ever do. Ian looked up, surprised by her tone. For once, Talia's expression wasn't composed or bureaucratic. It was sincere. That night, Ian sat in the dim silence of his apartment, watching the vertical lights of Viren's spire blink in rhythm with the city's pulses. Everything on Lycentra seemed to breathe in sequence, too perfect, too synchronized. He stared at the encrypted data file on his compad. The alternative clause. A way out. Maybe. Then he looked at the other notification waiting on his screen. New match assigned Dr. Liren Doss, Cognitive Compatibility Tier Alpha. Initial meeting tomorrow, Aero 9, Aero 0. Location Sector 9 Archives, another one. Third match. This time one based on psychological alignment. The accord wasn't slowing down. If anything, it was escalating. Ian leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. There was something more to all this than survival. Something calculated, something organized. And he was running out of time to figure out what. Sector 9 of Viren's spire was far from the glittering towers and aerial gardens Ian had grown used to. It was underground, literally and culturally, the intellectual core of Lycentra. Archive tunnels crisscrossed in perfect geometry beneath the capital, each filled with data vaults, memory banks, and cognitive labs built to simulate and study consciousness. Ian stood at the door of Cognitive Research Lab 14B, still sore from his bonding trial with Valana. This time there were no obstacle courses, just thick silence hums of ambient servers, and a faint floral scent he couldn't identify. The door slid open. Inside stood a woman, or something close to one. She was Lycentran clearly, but different. Her skin was matte white, almost translucent, with fine veins of light pulsing just beneath. Her eyes were deep violet, and her long hair floated in strands like it was submerged in invisible water. "Ian Rourke," she said without turning. "Welcome to the intersection of thought." "Dr. Liren Doss, I presume correct," she replied, gesturing for him to sit across from a floating interface desk. "Your files indicate high-level neuroplasticity, emotional resilience, and a peculiar resistance to embedded cognitive framing." "Fascinating." "Thanks," Ian said, unsure if it was a compliment. "I'll be performing cognitive congruence mapping," she continued. "No pain, just mental immersion. You'll remain aware throughout." "Okay, let's dive into my brain." Liren smiled faintly and activated the sync. The world around him fractured like glass, then reformed. Ian stood on a beach, not Earth, not Lycentra, just a simulated coastline, neutral and surreal. Liren stood beside him barefoot, her appearance subtly altered, more human, less alien. "Comforting. This is a shared construct," she explained, "a neural template to map subconscious alignment." He nodded, trying to remain calm as the surf tickled his feet without wetting them. "Feels real. Emotionally it is. That's the point." A door appeared nearby, freestanding weathered oak, utterly out of place. "Open it," she said. Ian hesitated. "What's behind it?" "Your projections, your instincts, your emotional anchors." He reached forward. The door creaked open. Inside, flashes of memories, his mother laughing on Earth, the bitter cold of their last winter, the tiny apartment where he spent nights dreaming of the stars. A voice not his own whispered, "You were always meant to leave." Liren stepped inside after him. "Your motivations stem from escape, not ambition." "Earth was dying," Ian muttered. "I didn't want to die with it, but you didn't come here to save anyone?" "No," he admitted. "I came for myself." Liren's expression didn't change. "Good. That honesty makes mapping easier." She waved her hand and the space shifted again, this time into a Lycentran nursery. Cradles lined the walls, each holding hybrid infants with glowing eyes and pale skin. Machines pulsed softly, monitoring development. But in the center stood one cradle empty. "Projected void," she said. "You fear failing." Ian frowned. "Failing who? Everyone. The accord. Yourself. Humanity. You carry the weight of symbolic expectation." He swallowed. "Do you think that's fair?" "I think it's accurate." She stepped closer. "But it's not the only possibility." With a flick, she replaced the scene with another him, older, seated at a lecture podium, speaking to both humans and Lycentrans. His face looked calm, content. "You're capable of integration," she said. "Even influence. That makes you dangerous." "To who?" "To the system," she said, voice suddenly quiet. "And to the people who don't want change." Ian blinked. "You mean the military faction?" Liren paused, then gave a slight nod. "This mind space is secure. Yes. There are factions within the Accord's leadership, those who view your role as functional only within control parameters. You're saying they're afraid of me? They're afraid of your choices, she said. Free will disrupts their projections. Ian turned to her. Why are you telling me this? She studied him for a long moment. Because I'm not just your cognitive match. I'm also a member of the Interfactional Research Coalition. We believe integration should come through consent, not conditioning. Ian folded his arms. You're with the resistance. We don't call ourselves that. But yes, we're allies of the Ethical Accord founders. Talia sent me. Liren smiled for the first time genuinely. Then you're further along than I expected. Back in the real world, the sync deactivated. Ian gasped, slightly blinking as the lab's white light came back into focus. Liren stood calmly as though they hadn't just explored the deepest corners of his mind. You pass, she said. Your neural alignment supports voluntary partnership under the Ethical Accord Charter. Is that good? It means we can sponsor your reassignment if we act quickly. She handed him a data crystal. This contains my signature and evaluation. You'll need a second signature from a civic sponsor, Talia. She's already approved your reclassification request. But there's a complication, Ian groaned. Of course there is. The Accord Oversight Directorate has flagged your profile for surveillance. Someone has reported irregular behavior, Valana Ian said bitterly. Most likely, she's loyal to the directive. If she suspects subversion, she won't hesitate to escalate. So what do? You need to attend your next bonding session as scheduled. You're kidding, Liren shook her head. Pulling out now will confirm her suspicions. But we'll embed an override request into your behavioral log. It will trigger a delay in further match introductions. That gives us time. Ian took a deep breath. And what happens if this all goes wrong? Then you disappear, she said flatly. We have contacts off-world, but that's the last option. Got it, Ian said. I'll play along. As he left the lab clutching the encrypted crystal, Ian felt the first true sense of agency he'd had since arriving on Lycentra. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He had a plan. That night, Ian sat on his balcony with a cup of imported earth tea, staring at the moons of Lycentra rising in synchronized arcs. The city pulsed below, alive, watching. A soft tone chimed from his comm pad. Another message. Origin, Valana Chase subject. Phase 2 commences tomorrow. Arrival required. Delay will be reported. And beneath it, in a separate encrypted channel, Origin Talia Vey subject received Liren's approval. Meet tomorrow 20 URO. Secure channel discussion. Location Botanical Vault 3A. The threads were coming together, but so were the eyes on him, and in the dark something told Ian that Phase 2 wasn't just a test of compatibility, it was a test of loyalty. The next morning, Ian stood once again in the sleek hallways of the Accord Integration Center, this time outside a chamber marked Phase 2 Compatibility Suite. Unlike Skytrace Dome, there was no physical challenge ahead. No drones or shifting platforms. Just a single door and a wall-mounted retinal scanner. He sighed. Let's get this over with. The door slid open and Valana Che was already waiting inside. The room was a minimalist lounge, curved seating, mood-adjusting lights, soft music composed of harmonic frequencies, known to calm both human and Lycentran nervous systems. A table between them bore a carafe of violet liquid and 2 crystal cups. Sit, Valana said curtly. Ian obeyed every movement watched. This phase evaluates psychological and emotional compatibility, she said. Verbal exchange, emotional resonance, empathy projection. This is not optional, I figured, Ian muttered. Valana poured the drink some sort of calming tonic, he assumed. Her hands moved with military precision. We will begin with direct questions. Respond truthfully. The room is monitoring for neural fluctuations. Of course it is. Valana looked him dead in the eye. Do you believe in the Accord? No, Ian said bluntly. The lights dimmed slightly. She didn't react. Explain. I believe in the people behind it, he added. Some of them, the ones who still care about consent, about ethics. But the Accord. As it stands now, it's a machine. A beautiful one, but it doesn't care who it grinds up. Valana sat back. Honesty noted. Do you, he asked, do I what, believe in it? There was a beat of silence. Then I believe in outcomes. My beliefs are irrelevant to the data. That's a convenient answer. That's a safe answer, she corrected. Her eyes studied him, searching for cracks. Do you find me attractive? Ian blinked. Is that part of the test answer? He hesitated, then shrugged. Yes, you're intense, elegant, a little terrifying. Noted, she said flatly, but he thought he saw a flicker of amusement. Do you feel drawn to any of your matches? She asked next. Ian paused. Yes, but not because of the program, because of how they act outside it. Elaborate. Talia's smart, measured. She listens. Liren. She sees through people. She didn't treat me like a tool. And I do, Ian looked her in the eyes. I think you want to believe this whole system is necessary? Maybe it was, but now you're too close to it to see that it's failing. Valana didn't respond immediately. Then she stood. Phase 2 concluded. He blinked. That's it. You're dismissed. She turned to leave, but as she reached the door, she hesitated. Be careful, Rourke, she said without looking back. You're becoming visible to the wrong people. And then she was gone. Hours later, Ian arrived at Botanical Vault 3A, a subterranean greenhouse tucked beneath one of the city's oldest living structures, the Rootspire Conservatory. He passed through layers of biometric checks and disguised scanners until finally stepping into a garden of bioluminescent trees, their leaves pulsing softly like heartbeats. Talia was waiting beside a low platform of mossy stone. She wore civilian attire this time, simple gray and white, no robes, no emblems. She looked younger somehow. You came, she said. I'm not sure I had a choice, Ian replied. You always do. That's the point. She gestured for him to sit. They faced each other under the dome of living vines, filtered light shifting between green and amber. Valana knows something, Ian began. She didn't say it, but I think she's watching me for someone else. Talia nodded. She reports to the Compliance Subdirectorate, and they report to the Military Integration Division. Vex Cormorn, Ian said quietly. Talia's face darkened. Exactly. She's dangerous. Ian leaned forward. Then why hasn't she come after me directly? She's watching. Evaluating. She doesn't act until she's sure of control. That's her strength and her weakness. Ian reached into his jacket and handed over the data crystal Liren had given him. Talia slid it into a reader embedded in her wrist pad. The soft hum of decrypting data filled the space. It's all here, she whispered. Her endorsement, neural alignment verification, even cross-species harmonics. With this, your reclassification is official. You're eligible for transition into the voluntary contribution tier. That gets me out. It gives you a legal out. A loophole the Accord can't close without admitting fault. Ian felt a flicker of hope. Then let's do it. Talia shook her head. Not yet. What Vex has begun consolidating authority over Accord operations. If we file this now, she'll suppress it before the transition completes. We need time and insurance. Ian's stomach sank. What kind of insurance, she said. He raised an eyebrow. I thought that's what I was already giving. Not biologically, she said. Politically. Vex is using your genetic profile as leverage, but your voice, your human perspective, could destabilize her narrative. You want me to testify? Talia nodded. Before the Civic Council. Publicly. That's suicide. It's precedent, she said. No human has ever challenged the Accord structure from within. If you speak under protected protocol, the law prevents retaliation until judgment is passed. That's a big if. Talia stood. Liren and I can secure the tribunal space. Nyx is working on the data stream leak. Nyx, Ian asked. She's one of the senior data archivists. Quiet, cautious, but loyal to the original Accord values. Ian ran a hand through his hair. This just keeps getting bigger. You're at the center now, Talia said, whether you like it or not. He looked up at her eyes, searching. Why are you helping me? Really, Talia's expression softened. Because I helped design the original Accord. Before it became a weapon, I wanted it to be something noble. And now I want to fix what I broke. And you're the only one who can do what I never could. That night, Ian returned to his apartment under the flickering twin moons. The walls displayed ambient data, weather news scrolls, public notices. But one alert caught his eye. Notice Accord High Officer Cormorn to deliver emergency statement tomorrow. Live broadcast. Civic Plaza. 10:00. Vex was moving, and so was he. His comm pad pinged again. New match assigned, Commander Vex Cormorn. Directive override. Meeting scheduled tomorrow. 0830. Private location. Compliance mandatory. Ian stared at the screen pulse rising. The military faction was no longer watching from the shadows. They were stepping into the light, and he was next on their schedule. At precisely 0830 the next morning, Ian arrived at the coordinates for his meeting with Commander Vex Cormorn. The location was nowhere near the usual Accord facilities. It was an isolated sector of Varen Spire's eastern wall, a military-adjacent platform repurposed into a sterile gray chamber. There were no windows, no guards, just silence and tension so dense it pressed into his chest like a lead vest. The door opened before he could knock. Vex stood inside, armored not in combat gear, but in ceremonial black, each plate polished to obsidian sheen. Her forearms were clasped at her back, and her golden skin shimmered like metal in the low light. Eyes like molten amber locked onto him the moment he stepped in. Ian Rourke, she said, genetic contributor, probationary civic participant, unauthorized contact with subversive Accord personnel, suspicious behavioral deviation. Ian didn't flinch. You forgot chronic sarcasm. Namwadi Vex stepped forward. You are not amusing. You're not surprising, he countered. Let's drop the script. Why am I here? She motioned to a chair. Sit. He did, slow and deliberate. Vex paced around him, circling like a predator. You were given opportunity, she said. You were matched, protected, prioritized. Exploited, Ian corrected. She ignored him. Instead, you seek escape. You poison participants with concepts like autonomy and defiance. I didn't poison anything, he snapped. I spoke the truth. Something your side avoids like a disease. Vex stopped directly behind him. You are valuable, but not irreplaceable. Then why am I still here? Because even the military respects efficiency, she said. Voluntary compliance produces higher yield. Your cooperation is ideal. Your resistance is manageable. You're threatening me. I'm informing you, she said coldly. You have two choices: reinstate your participation in the standard Accord sequence, or be classified as a hostile element and detained indefinitely. Ian stood slowly. And what if I go public before that? Vex's eyes narrowed. You won't make it to a tribunal. Not with your records scrubbed and your permissions revoked. You'd vanish into procedural limbo. So you are afraid. Her face remained stone. I'm pragmatic. Your narrative threatens cohesion. Without cohesion, the Accord collapses. That is unacceptable. He stared at her. You'd rather destroy the entire program than let it change. Vex stepped closer, her voice low and sharp. I would preserve our species at any cost. If weakness spreads, survival ends. Ian met her gaze without flinching. Then maybe your species doesn't deserve to survive. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Vex turned sharply and activated a nearby console. A hologram flickered to life: genetic maps, medical data, cascading failure patterns. Ian recognized some of it from Liren's lab. This, Vex said, pointing to the display, is the future without intervention. Within 3 generations, Lycentra will experience system-wide genetic failure, internal immune collapse, cognitive regression, infertility. I've seen it. Then you understand what's at stake. Ian took a step forward. I do. But coercion isn't salvation. And you are the reason the Accord is failing. Vex studied him. You are making a mistake. No, he said. I'm making a choice. And then he walked out. Talia met him on the roof of an unregistered education hub an hour later. The wind tugged at her cloak as she scanned the perimeter. You're still alive, she said, clearly surprised. She made her threat, Ian replied. I made mine. Was it recorded? Probably scrubbed. But I got this. He handed her a small chip he'd palmed from the console, encrypted files with Vex's classified genetic data. Evidence. Talia slipped it into her wristpad and nodded. This helps. We can authenticate it through Liren's lab. Ian rubbed his forehead. We need to move faster. Vex is preparing to make a public statement. She wants to seal the Accord under military authority. Talia's eyes went cold. If that happens, it's over. No tribunal, no volunteers. Just directives. We have to beat her to the broadcast. She nodded. Nix is already setting up a secure feed. The Civic Tribunal will still see your testimony if we can get you inside before lockdown. Then let's not waste time. That evening, with the twin moons rising above Varen's spire, Ian slipped into the Civic Assembly Hall via an underground corridor used by sanitation drones. Talia and Nix had arranged everything a backdoor route to the inner rotunda, where the tribunal would soon begin. He was dressed in formal neutral wear, his biometric chip temporarily masked by a dampening implant. Liren met him at the inner checkpoint with a quiet nod and a datapad. This holds your speech. Annotated. Approved by the ethical committee. Stick to the script. Ian raised an eyebrow. What if I don't? Then speak from the heart, she said, but be ready to live with the consequences. Nix arrived seconds later, her glowing skin muted under a dark cloak. Broadcast line is open. If Vex tries to block it, we'll reroute to the external archive. And if they trace it, we'll already be gone. Ian stared at the sealed tribunal doors. How much time do we have? Talia appeared beside him. 40 minutes. Enough for one statement. Then let's make it count. Inside the Civic Tribunal chamber, the council assembled 10 Lacentran representatives, 3 human liaisons, and dozens of digital delegates from aligned species. Vex Cormorn stood at the center platform already mid-speech. Without decisive leadership, she said, voice crisp, the Accord loses purpose. Volunteers alone are insufficient. Progress requires structure, order, directive compliance ensures survival. The chamber lights flickered. A ripple moved through the delegates. And then Ian stepped onto the platform beside her. Vex turned slowly. Her face said everything. Rage, surprise, containment. This is unauthorized, she hissed. Ian Rourke, the High Chancellor, interrupted from above. What is the meaning of this? I invoke Section 8 of the Accord Charter, Ian said. Protected civic testimony on behalf of voluntary Accord participants. A silence followed. Even Vex couldn't stop it. Section 8 was ironclad. You may proceed, the Chancellor said. Ian took a breath. I came to Lycentra looking for opportunity, he began. What I found was a program built on desperation, coded in diplomacy, and enforced by fear. He stepped forward. I was matched without full knowledge, pushed into trials, evaluated like livestock. But I endured because I believed the Accord could be more. Vex's jaw tightened. I've met people here who want change, who believe in partnership, not control, who created solutions the military refuses to acknowledge. He held up the chip he'd stolen. This data proves that coercion isn't the only path. Gene therapy exists, consent works, and freedom isn't weakness, it's strength. He turned slowly, addressing the chamber. You can let this program become a cage, or you can fix it, but you can't do both. The lights pulsed gold, an indication of high emotional response from the assembly. Vex stepped forward. This is emotional manipulation. This is truth, Ian fired back. And for once, you don't get to silence it. Outside, the broadcast echoed across Lycentra, across human settlements, across allied outposts. Within the hour, Talia received confirmation. A majority of the Civic Council had called for an emergency vote, and Vex's planned directive frozen indefinitely. The Civic Council's vote was swift. By dawn, official dispatches had flooded every terminal on Lycentra motion to suspend directive override authority approved by majority vote. Accord transition to voluntary structure under review. For the first time in over a decade, the ironclad grip of the Military Integration Division had cracked. Ian sat alone in his temporary quarters at the ethics compound, staring at the blank wall in front of him. His compad had been buzzing nonstop since the broadcast congratulatory messages, threats, invitations from media channels, both human and Lysentran. He ignored them all. He didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Not when Vex was still out there. And not when the backlash had just begun. Talia entered the room unannounced, her expression neutral, but her posture tense. There's been an incident. Ian stood instantly. We're Liren's lab. Breached. She's alive, but they destroyed her records. Let me guess, no trace of the attackers. None officially, Talia said grimly, but unofficially, we know who sent them. Ian clenched his fists. Vex is retaliating. She's not done. You humiliated her publicly. She's consolidating her supporters in the military. If she can't win through politics, she'll try something else. Talia nodded. And there's more. The Civic Council has agreed to hear final arguments before enacting the full Accord reform. You have one last chance to push this over the line. When 3 days. Then we'd better prepare, Ian said. There's one more complication, she said. Valana. Ian froze. What about her? She's requested a private meeting with you, says she wants to clarify her position. After everything, she's not a soldier. She's still in the administrative division. But if she's reaching out now, something's shifted. Ian hesitated. Set it up. They met in a neutral zone, Sector 6's meditation garden, a place designed for reflection and reconciliation. It was the closest thing La Centra had to holy ground. Valana arrived precisely on time, her posture rigid, but her robes subdued gray and teal rather than the standard black of her compliance division. She sat opposite Ian on a flat, floating stone, surrounded by water and flowering vines. He waited for her to speak first. I watched your testimony, she said quietly. Ian nodded. Wasn't subtle. No, it wasn't. She looked down at her hands. You've made things complicated. You mean harder to control, harder to deny. Ian tilted his head. Why did you want to meet? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice cracked just slightly. When I joined the Accord, it was about purpose, about saving our people. I believed in the system. I enforced it. But I saw what it did to you, and others like you. Her eyes met his. And I see what Vex is becoming. Ian leaned forward. Then help us. I already have, she said. I sent your speech to my division's internal review panel before the breach at Liren's lab. Someone leaked the data to the media net. There's no way to suppress it now. Ian blinked. That was you. She nodded. Why, he asked. Valana's voice was barely above a whisper. Because control isn't survival. It's stagnation. And because, I believe you're right. She stood. I'm not your ally. Not exactly. But I'm no longer your obstacle either. Ian rose to his feet beside her. That's a start. That night, the Ethics Coalition held an emergency meeting at an undisclosed facility. Nix, Talia, Liren, and a few others gathered in a chamber laced with signal dampeners and physical encryption fields. They reviewed the latest polling from the Civic Council delegates. The numbers are close, Nix said, frowning. 4 solid votes for reform. 3 undecided. 3 likely to swing with Vex. We need 5, Talia said. Ian paced. What's our leverage? Lyrian brought up a holographic chart. We can present the final sequencing model for the gene therapy adapted fully to licensure physiology. No human hybridization required, but we need a live donor to validate the synthesis. You mean me? She nodded. Just one sequence, one sample. We combine it with the adaptive stabilizer, and we can show the council the outcome. And if we don't, then it's all theory, and Vex's argument that hybridization is the only viable future will gain ground again. Ian rubbed his eyes. When do you need the sample now? Without another word, he rolled up his sleeve. Liren extracted the genetic material with practiced efficiency. No pain, just the weight of history being passed into a vial. Do you trust me? She asked quietly. He nodded. You're the only one who hasn't lied to me. She smiled. Let's make it count. The final day came faster than anyone expected. The Civic Assembly Hall was at full capacity. Delegates lined the gallery. Representatives from allied species observed remotely. Media access was restricted, but no one could stop the data feeds from spreading through Lycentra's networks like wildfire. Vex Cormorn stood on the primary podium, radiating authority. Ian stood opposite her, flanked by Talia, Lyraean, and Nix. A translucent barrier separated the two parties, symbolic but deeply satisfying. The High Chancellor addressed the room. Today we hear final arguments. One side calls for a return to structure, military-led enforced hybridization. The other proposes a new Accord voluntary therapeutic inclusive. Vex stepped forward first. She delivered a powerful speech detailing the risks, the failures of the past, the threat of extinction. She highlighted failed initiatives, framed human involvement as a temporary solution, and insisted only control could save Lycentra. Ian listened, expression unreadable. Then the Chancellor turned to him. You may present. Ian stepped forward, datapad in hand, but he didn't look at it. I've already told my story, he began. But what matters now isn't me, it's the truth. He motioned to Liren, who activated the display behind him. This, Ian said, pointing to the shifting helix on screen, is Lycentra's future. Not theoretical, not hypothetical. Real. Synthesized 2 days ago. Tested. Stable. The gene sequence unfolded before the assembly, smooth, clean, without hybrid instability. Liren spoke next. We used a single sample, one willing donor, no breeding program, no coercion. The therapy adapts to all Lycentran subtypes. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Vex stepped forward. Unverified, dangerous. Uncontrolled. No, Talia said, voice clear. It's everything the Accord was meant to be. Ian raised his voice. The question before you isn't whether we survive. It's how, with dignity or with domination. He turned to Vex. You say control is strength, I say choice is, and this time we're choosing. The vote was tense, silent, electric. One by one, delegates cast their decisions. The chamber held its breath. When the final tally appeared, 6 in favor of reform, 4 against. The Civic Accord was reborn, not by war, not by rebellion, but by truth and choice. The final vote rippled through the Civic Assembly Hall like a shockwave. 6 in favor, 4 against. Done. Vex Cormorn stood rigid, her amber eyes burning into the display, as if sheer willpower could change the outcome. Her support had fractured. The military's hold on the Accord was broken, not annihilated, but constrained. She didn't protest, didn't speak. She simply turned cape snapping behind her and walked out of the hall, flanked by 2 silent guards. Ian didn't feel triumphant. He felt breathless. Liren was the first to exhale. It's over, Notalia corrected softly. It's just beginning. The chamber erupted in noise, delegates talking at once, data feeds, buzzing, civic liaisons, already drafting the first provisions of the new Accord. A media barrier lifted. The story, his story, would be broadcast planet-wide within minutes. Nix touched Ian's arm. Come on, you should see what comes next. The Accord Ethics Complex had already begun transformation. The former compliance zones were being repurposed into counseling centers and voluntary partner matching agencies. The term directive assignment was being stripped from all files and replaced with consensual alignment. Ian stood in a high overlook balcony beside a floor-to-ceiling display of the new Accord Charter, simplified, human-readable, and embedded with translation nodes. It pulsed with one word at the top: consent. Talia stood beside him, her posture relaxed in a way he hadn't seen before. You changed it. I didn't do it alone, Ian said. You lit the match. She smiled, and it looked like something real now. There's still resistance. The military faction hasn't disappeared. Some delegates are already calling for oversight hearings. They should, Ian said. No system survives if it can't be challenged. Nix appeared behind them with Liren in tow. The therapy trials are underway. Voluntary donors only. We've already got 3,000 participants registered in the first wave, and not one pair assigned against their will, Liren added with pride. Ian turned to Nix. What about the humans still in the program? They'll be given a choice, she said. Every one of them. Stay, leave, or convert their contribution to research roles. You'll get to address them if you want. He paused. Later. She nodded. We'll hold the channel open. That night, Ian finally returned to his original apartment in Varenspire. The place felt different, bigger somehow. Quieter. It wasn't until he was halfway through a cup of synth tea that the door chimed. Display visitor. Talia's face appeared calm but unreadable. May I come in? He nodded. Always. She stepped inside, and for a moment they just stood there, unsure of what to say. The tension between them wasn't bureaucratic anymore. It was personal. Honest. I wasn't sure if you'd still want to see me, she said. After everything we went through, he smiled faintly. I don't want to not see you. Talia stepped closer. I wasn't supposed to feel anything for you. At first you were just a risk factor, a variable to manage. I was trouble, Ian agreed. You are trouble, she said, lips twitching. But you also reminded me why I started all this. Why I believed in the Accord before it got twisted. She touched his hand gently. I don't know what comes next. For Lycentra. For the program. For us. Ian squeezed her fingers lightly. We figure it out. Together. If you want. She looked up at him. I do. This time no assignments. No protocols. Just two people choosing. And that made all the difference. 6 months later, Varen's spire shimmered with renewal. The Accord had been rebuilt not as a weapon but a bridge. Voluntary contributors formed the backbone of the therapy program. Lycentra's birth rates had stabilized. The genetic cascade was slowing. And for the first time in generations, a new wave of children born free of hybrid instability was beginning to arrive. Ian now served as an ethics liaison for the Accord Reform Council. His job was to ensure transparency between human and Lycentran communities. He spoke often on broadcasts, at schools, at interspecies forums, but he always returned home to the apartment that overlooked the city. Talia lived there too now, technically still part of the Accord leadership, but far removed from the woman who once quoted statutes instead of feelings. She'd learned to laugh, to pause, to listen. One evening, as they sat watching the twin moons rise above the flowering arc bridges of Sector 7, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Did you ever think, she asked softly, that it would end like this? Ian chuckled. Which part? The political revolution or falling in love with an alien ethics officer? Both. He grinned. No. But I'm glad it did. She looked up at him. We're starting the cultural exchange program next month. Voluntary pairings. No assignments. Just connections. Dialogues. That's what we needed from the beginning. We needed you. Ian looked out across the skyline now dotted with parks and light pods instead of surveillance towers. No, he said quietly. You just needed someone to say no, so you could choose something better. Talia kissed his cheek. And we did. They sat in silence for a while, the city alive with possibility around them. Two worlds, two people, a new Accord, not born from compliance, but from choice, from courage, from change.